0.037 as a fraction. Here, we will try to see how we can write decimal fractions as fractions. To write it as a fraction, there are only two things we need. First, the numerator, and second, the denominator. Writing the numerator is extremely simple. We just write the decimal fraction without the decimal point. Without the decimal point, we write it as 37. And in the denominator, we write a 1 followed by zeros. We write a 1 here followed by zeros. But the important question is, how many zeros? The number of zeros we write after the 1 is simply equal to the number of decimal places. There are 3 decimal places here: tenths, hundredths, and thousands. So we add 3 zeros. There you go, that's your fraction. 0.037 can be written as 37 by 1000. Let's try out another example. Note that this is pretty much all you need to know to convert decimal fractions to fractions. How do you write 0.2850 as a fraction? Look at the first step. We write the numerator without the decimal point of the decimal fraction. We write a 2850 as our numerator. In the denominator, we write a 1 followed by zeros. The number of zeros we write here will be equal to the number of decimal places in the decimal fraction. As there are 4 decimal places, we write 4 zeros after the 1. That's your fraction, 2850 by 10,000. If we view 0.2850 as 0.285, then we can write the fraction as 285 by 1000, which is an equivalent of this fraction. Now let's try to write 4.343 as a fraction. The numerator will be 4343, and as there are 3 decimal places, we divide this by 1000. Actually, there's another way to write this as a fraction. We write the integral part separately, which is 4, and then we write 0.343 as a fraction. That can be written as 343 by 1000. This becomes the mixed fraction form. This is the whole part and this is the proper fraction part. If you convert this mixed fraction to an improper one, you will get 4343 by 1000. But how do we actually understand all this? Look at the decimal fraction, 4.343. Based on decimal places, this is how we can write it. 4 in the ones place, 3 in the tenths place, 4 in the hundredths place, and 3 in the thousandths place. Solving this further, this is what we get. 4 is the integral part and the decimal part was written like this. And solving this further, we get 4 plus 343 by 1000. And this is the mixed fraction for 343 by 1000. If you add these two, you will get 4343 by 1000. How do we convert the fraction 6 by 8 to the decimal fraction form? All we have to do is divide 6 by 8. We can say that in the first step, we divide the numerator by the denominator. We write 6 and divide it by 8. How do we proceed with the division? 6 does not divide exactly into 8 and we will be left with a remainder of 6. We follow a different approach here. We keep adding zeros to the dividend until the remainder becomes 0. We write a 0 here. Now we divide 60 by 8. We know that 8 times 7 is 56 and 60 minus 56 is 4. The remainder is not 0 yet. So we add another 0 and get it down next to 4. We know that 8 times 5 is 40 and 40 minus 40 gives us a 0. Now we can stop adding zeros as the remainder is 0. All we need to do now is place the decimal point in the quotient, which is 75. But where do we place the decimal point? Do we write it as 7.5 or 0.75 or 0.075 or any other way. To know that, we need to understand this simple rule. The number of decimal places will equal the number of zeros added. In this case, the number of zeros added was 2. So we put a decimal point before 2 digits to get 0.75. So 6 by 8 will equal 0.75. We will look at a couple of more examples in the other two parts of this video. Decimal fraction, we had followed these steps. We divide the numerator by the denominator. We keep adding zeros to the dividend until we get a 0 as the remainder. And then we place the decimal point in the quotient. The number of decimal places will equal the number of zeros added. With the same steps, let's try to convert 437 by 10 to a decimal fraction. In the first step, we divide 437 by 10. 10 times 4 gives us 40, and 43 minus 40 gives us 3. We get the 7 down. 10 times 3 is 30. 37 minus 30 is 7. The remainder is still not 0. So we add a 0 to the dividend and make this 70. 10 times 7 is 70. We finally get a 0. As we added just one 0, we have just one decimal place and get the answer as 43.7. 437 by 10 is 43.7. That was easy, but it took us some time. Let's find out if there is a better way to convert this fraction into a decimal fraction. The fraction we had was 437 by 10. If we have multiples of 10 in the denominator, then writing a fraction as a decimal fraction becomes really easy. We have to place the decimal point somewhere in the numerator. But the question is where? It's easy. We start off from the right and move as many places to the left as the number of zeros in the denominator. As we have just one 0 in the denominator, we move one place to the left and write the decimal fraction as 43.7. What about 301 divided by 100? As there are two zeros in the denominator, we write the decimal fraction as 3.01. From the rightmost digit, we moved 2 places to the left. Here's the last one, 23 by 1000. There are 3 zeros in the denominator, but just 2 digits in the numerator. What do we do in this case? As we have to move 3 places to the left, we write the decimal fraction as 0.023. We just added a 0 here to make sure we have 3 decimal places for the 3 zeros in the denominator. This technique can only be used if the denominator is a multiple of 10. In 2 parts, we have seen how fractions can be converted to decimal fractions, and these were the steps we had followed. How do we convert a fraction like 11 9 by 40 into the decimal fraction form? This is a mixed fraction where 11 is the whole part and 9 by 40 is the fractional part. Now tax your brain a bit. Would you convert this mixed fraction to an improper one and then use our steps to get the decimal fraction? You can do that, but that's definitely not the best method. This is actually 11 plus 9 by 40, so all we really need to do is convert 9 by 40 into a decimal fraction without bothering about the whole part. So we just need to convert the fractional part. The first step is to divide the numerator by the denominator. Don't forget, we are looking only at 9 by 40 now. We divide 9 by 40. We add a 0 here as the remainder of 9 divided by 40 is not 0. 40 times 2 is 80. 90 minus 80 is 10. As the remainder is still not 0, we add another 0 here and write it underneath. 40 times 2 is 80. 100 minus 80 is 20. The remainder is still not 0. So we add another 0 and write it here. 40 times 5 is 200. Finally, we get a remainder of 0. we added 3 zeros here. After we get the remainder as 0, we have to place the decimal point in the quotient, and that depends on the number of zeros we added. As we added 3 zeros, we write the quotient as 0.225. Don't forget, the original fraction was 11 9/40. Adding 11 with 0.225, we get the decimal fraction as 11.225. So keep in mind that when you want to convert a mixed fraction to a decimal fraction form, convert only the fractional part and then add it to the whole part.